There you are. This is teachers rating the kids. How many of the kids in your next class will be responsible? To be responsible, we had something like 25 responsible behaviours. Some of them will be doing the right thing, some of them are helping others, like I said. So in China, most of the kids are personally responsible, and between some and most are communally responsible. You do a quick rating for your own class. Share it on your table. Let's see what you got. That's Israel. And what do you notice? You notice that the communal's a little less. The communal's noticeably less, and the personal's a little less. And in Australia, interesting enough, yeah, but wait till you see what the kids say. And I don't understand the distinction between, because you'll find that in two countries, not ours, the kids are pretty close. But in Australia, for some reason, the teachers are much more positive about this than the kids. And I'll show you some other data about teachers and students' perceptions of what teachers do in classroom, and there are enormous differences as well. So for some reason, it's different here.
Do you think it's cultural though? Because it's not cool to say you are, a community as such without our kids. I'm looking at those and I'm thinking in China.
Yeah.
Clearly, the objective is,
Yeah, well, it is.
Culturally.
And Japan, they have groups. They work within groups.
I don't know with Israel, so I can't speak to that. But I'm thinking in terms of our kids. If we were to ask our kids straight up about it, I reckon they would not be prepared to actually admit to it in a lot of cases.
Possibly. You're saying that they would be, they wouldn't say they were.
Yeah.
Could be. And that might be the data. I'd have to interview them and find out. Yeah. Because when you do look at the kids, notice different scale. In China, it's between mostly and very much like me to do all those things. And the communal ones, it's nearly mostly like me. In Israel, it looks like that. And in Australia, the kids say it like that. So maybe they're more responsible than we give them credit for, than they give themselves credit for. Or maybe we exaggerate it. I don't know. Who takes a less positive view? Who would say, well, look, you're saying that maybe they are as responsible as everybody else, but they're not prepared to acknowledge it or admit it because it isn't cool in this country to say that. Has anyone got another view as to why the teacher... Yeah.
Maybe they think some of the things that they do are just second nature and not necessarily anything out of the ordinary.
Well, they weren't asking those terms, though. They were just said, do you do this, do you... is it like you to do this, do this, do this? And there were 25 of these things. So they weren't given a general thing, yeah?
That's what I think this was like. So I wonder if you have a fluctuation depending. Primary school kids tend to be really involved. Secondary school they start to fade out, and then as they go up senior years, they are much more involved and more personally responsible. And I just wonder, I want to know what.
Okay, good question. It's a great question. I think I can answer it. I mean, you should ask. Bit familiar? You were spot on. Well, so you're right. Personal responsibility, that's grade 6, year 7, year 9, year 11. The only problem is year 11 is lower than grade 6. But it's something. It's 22 schools in each group. 22 schools in each group. So this is interesting. Okay. So what does this mean? What are we actually looking at here? We're looking at the response of about 4,000 kids. And what are they saying? They're saying it's mostly like me to be communally responsible. We know it dips in year 9. That's not a surprise. And by year 11, they're not quite as responsible as they were when they entered the place. Now, I remember... Now, that would be in itself a great headline if you were trying to bash teachers. To say, they're not getting more responsible the longer they are in school. Isn't there some concern about that? And certainly with communal, they are much more communal in the primary setting than in the secondary, and it does not pick up. Now, it would be interesting to redo these data because they're about 7 years old. And I want to do them in the schools we're in, obviously. because I don't think it'll look like that in those schools, at least some schools I've seen, especially if we could do it for 4 years running and track them across the... What I'm scared stiff of, by the way, and I've said already, they're going to come highly empowered and responsible out of a primary school and then go into a normal secondary setting. Now, according to the research, any student who comes out of a highly responsible Year 6 and goes into a relatively disempowered Year 7 can be somewhat problematic. I once went in a study, I had done a school, Peter 12, and I was rung by the principal after the study and asked, could I come and speak to his staff? And I said, maybe, I'll look at the data. So I looked at the data, and the grade 6 data were the best I had for the region, and the secondary were the worst, meaning the primary had the least teacher aggression, the most teacher relationship, most interest in their subject, the most, everything was positive. Secondary the worst in the region. So I thought, I've miscoded something. Either I've coded the primary all around the wrong way or the secondary something's gone wrong. So I looked at it again and again and couldn't find the mistake. So I rang the guy and I said, look, there's a mistake, I can't find it. He said, no, there's no mistake. Why do you think I rang you? I've got problems here and I want you to come out and talk about it. So I was a bit worried about it. So I said, look, I'll send the data and what I interpret it to mean, and then I'll come and answer questions. So I went there and all the teachers are in this big room. And one of the questions was, well, we see the data, but we want to know which Year 7 you surveyed. Because we have a good Year 7 and we have a bad Year 7. And we need to know, we think you must have surveyed the bad Year 7, and that's what's happened. And I couldn't tell them which one because it wasn't done by me. But then someone said, who's in the bad Year 7? And the teacher rattled off about 8 names. And 2 primary teachers stood up and said, those children were excellent last year. Now, that was, it was time for me to leave. But you know, you could have cut the air with a knife. It was just remarkable. I mean, I went back and I looked at the literature, and sure enough, it's everywhere, that if you come out of a highly empowered Year 7 into a disempowering... See, I've reported data which says that teachers of Year 7 think the kids can be as responsible as prep teachers think preps can be, and teachers of Year 12 think those kids can be much more responsible than the Year 7s, which equates to about what grade 6 teachers say grade 6 kids can be. So the graph sort of goes more responsible up to grade 6, drops right back down again and starts again. And I've reported these data. So the transition where you're going from a teacher who thinks you can be highly responsible to one who thinks you need total monitoring and control could be a major problem. So they may be involving me in a project which is going to destroy a whole bunch of secondary schools and a whole bunch of primary kids as they enter. I hate to think that would be the case, but it's possible. Yeah.